everyone. Welcome to our second broadcast of our second podcast of Let's Talk Infection Prevention, brought to you by Medama Solutions. Today we have with us Mike Nacella, who is my partner in crime in developing this podcast, and the editor and the one who really has the best questions here on this podcast. And then we have Renan, who is the man who I can't do anything without. And finally, we have Ronnie, who is our infection prevention specialist. And we have a guest today, Darrel Hicks, which Ronnie is going to do the intro on that, my partner in crime, Ronnie. So go ahead. I don't know what crime we're doing yet. We got to figure out what the crime we're going to be doing on this podcast.
Hopefully no crime, because I don't look good in orange. So today's guest, though, is Darrel Hicks. Darrel was no stranger to professionals that are in infection control and infection prevention. Darrel's been around a long time in the industry. He's well known. He has great expertise in infection prevention. His career is greater than 34 years in healthcare and educating, and so we are really honored to have Darrel here today with us. Welcome, Darrel.
Thank you, Ronnie. Nice to meet you all.
So, Darrel, just tell us a little about yourself and we'll start from there.
Yeah, I spent 34 years in cleaning and disinfecting hospitals. And so I was in hospitals from 100 beds up to about 650 beds over my career, and ran not only the EBS department, but patient transportation. But I learned early on that, a clean hospital, a hospital can be clean but not disinfected, or not sanitary, but a sanitary hospital is clean. And so we always strive for not appearances so much as it is for cleaning for health and cleaning for the best outcomes for patients.
Where was the location of the hospitals that you worked in? What areas?
They're mostly in I started off, it was up in Des Moines, Iowa, and then Kansas City, and then back to St. Louis, and I just lived right outside of St. Louis, Missouri.
Oh, wow.
That's mostly Midwest.
Right, yeah, that's what I was about to say. And Des Moines, Iowa is beautiful, beautiful part of the country too. Been there a couple of months ago. Was very impressed with
corn.
If you like corn, right. Well, popcorn.
I'd say that the state tree of Iowa is the corn stalk.
Right, there you go. So a lot of flat land in the areas you've been in, pretty much.
Yeah.
So in the hospitals that you were in, and guys, feel free to pop in if you have any questions. I don't want to hog the whole show here, but just curious, what would you say would be your number one challenge that you could say is across the board every single hospital that you've been in?
Well, part of the thing that we're up against is that people believe that cleaning services is a commodity, and people want to find the cheapest. It's like buying toilet paper, and they want the cheapest price for the best product or whatever. And so I believe that with recent developments with the CDC and others, that it's becoming more patient environment. And so, I think that many people assume that a shiny floor is what is the gold standard for cleanliness in hospitals, and I don't doubt that appearances speak well of how well things are run. But my wife and I, when we go to a restaurant, if I go to the restroom and it's dirty in the restaurant, then I assume that the kitchen staff is using that restroom. And if it's that bad, then how bad is the kitchen? And people, if they walk into the front door of the hospital and the lobby has got litter on it, and you know, the corners and edges are look like they've been waxed over dirt, then people begin to wonder what kind of care grandma is getting in the hospital. So
Yep.
appearances are important for impressions, and they're usually a pretty good indication of whether the hospital is clean or dirty, and whether people are getting the care that they need. But I was fortunate enough to work the last 16 years of my career in a hospital where the CEO, the president, walked around, and if he found a Kleenex on the floor, he picked it up, and he told people in new employee orientation, you better not step over that piece of dirt on the or litter on the floor. And so it's kind of the Disney world thing that people associate cleanliness with that you care about the public and what their perceptions are, and their perceptions are a pretty good indication of whether you got an infection prevention or an HAI problem in the hospital. They're usually a pretty good indication of whether you really are about infection prevention in the cleaning department.
It's funny, Darrell, you mentioned restaurants, walking into a restaurant, if you see the bathrooms dirty, you wouldn't eat in the restaurant. We recently had, a product that we were selling in one of our hospitals, and it was a product that sort of, I don't want to, advertise on our podcast. The idea is to really be education, so I won't really get into the details of what it was, but it identified uh, in real time what people were feeling or seeing in the hospital. And it was an incredible eye opener because we found a direct correlation between the bathrooms, the public restrooms in the hospital, and the HCAP scores, especially in the ED area.
Yeah,
If, and I was shocked because, we spend so much time in the lobbies, the hallways, the patient rooms, putting down products that give you a high shine, or products that will, make the floors look clean. We worry about the baseboards and corners and edges. And for some reason, the bathrooms, the public restrooms, I guess because they're so hard and difficult to maintain on a regular basis. But that really was amazing to see how there was a direct correlation with the HCAP scores in the public restrooms. I was sort of blown away by the power of what a restroom can do to your HCAP scores.
right.
Did you find that when you were in your hospitals? Was that a common
Yeah,
thread?
and I think the other thing people associate with cleanliness is smells. And if I'm approaching that restroom, I don't care where it is, in a hospital, airport, wherever, and I smell the cherry bomb before I even get there, I can bet it's dirty. They're just
Yep.
covering up the problem of soil that was hasn't been cleaned for centuries, and they're trying to cover it up with cherry bomb or some other flavor of the day. And
Right.
so,
Yep.
so I just automatically know that the restroom is dirty, and so I think that especially most of our hospital population is elderly, and so elderly people perceive cleanliness with odors. And I always said, if you had Pine Sol in a spray bottle and just walked the hall and sprayed with Pine Sol, people would think the place was clean.
Right. It's funny.
True.
Yeah.
True, it is.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think that cleanliness does. I think it should have a fresh smell, but I'm not saying anything heavy. But I think part of the problem is that just the unqualified use of the term cleaning, I think, should be avoided, and communicating hygiene practices especially with the cleaning staff, because you say clean or cleaning, then it means different things to different people, and depending on where they come from, and it could be it's most likely another country. In this country, they're in the EVS department, housekeeping, and English isn't their first language, and so you don't know what the standards of cleaning was where they came from. And so I think we just need to get rid of clean. I think it's a $10 an hour word that we need to get rid of if we're going to project professional cleaning. And I think that instead of cleaning, we should use the term hygienic cleaning. And that refers to a process that is intended to reduce the number of pathogens on surfaces to an acceptable safety target level, and makes it fit for purpose. And when I say fit for purpose, the telephone in the head nurse's office isn't as important as the one at the nurse's station that gets used by a lot of people. And so fit for purpose for that phone would be cleaning it, probably, wiping it down probably 10 times a day with a disinfectant wipe in the nurse's station. But so there are different purposes for surfaces, but I think that when you look at hand hygiene, we just had International Hand Hygiene Month or week, and hand hygiene involves these elements, and clean running water is one. And during the Ebola outbreak in Western Africa, they had hand washing, but it was a bucket of water and a bar of soap. And you wanted to be the first person to wash your hands, not the 10th person or 15th person to use that water. So clean running water is first, then soap and agitation. You have to work in the soap, and it takes a certain amount of time. 20 seconds. We learned back during COVID and hand washing, and then to really pay attention to places where germs hide, and under rings and around your wrist and the backs of your hands, but then thorough washing with water and drying with a clean paper towel. So why do we have this definition of what clean hands are, and why don't we apply that to surfaces as well? That I think that what we know about bacteria and especially bacteria, which is on the most common bug on surfaces, they need two things or three things actually. They need food, moisture, and oxygen. And if we can take away one of those two or one of those three items, then it would be the food. And if we can remove the food, then they can't survive. So I think that if we did, I don't know of any reputable studies that have been done, that if we just if we followed a process where we cleaned and use soap and water basically, and then wipe that off, apply your disinfectant, and then when you're done, give it air dry time, and then you rinse that and dried it. I don't know of any studies that have really looked at that, but I know that if we remove 99.9% of the soil from that surface, then there's not much left to live on for the bacteria.
Well, Darrel, I just want to interrupt you on one thing. It's interesting. I mean, there's so many things that you just mentioned that I would want to unpack and sort of study and understand from your expertise of how we deal with different surfaces. Because when you mentioned about the hand washing, the first thing that I went to my mind, and I like how you mentioned washing with water, because today in hospitals, people are using hand sanitizers literally all day. I don't see them washing their hands with water and soap. And what's fascinating to me is in hospitals, we deal with organisms like C. diff and Candida auris, which are extremely deadly. They're drug-resistant bacteria and fungi. And we're going ahead and pumping hand sanitizer on hands and saying, okay, great, we did what we needed to do. But the word sanitizer is not disinfectant. Sanitizer means it kills a certain amount of organisms, and most of them, alcohol, as far as I know, does not, the 70% or 72%, whatever you got in that dispenser, is not killing C. diff and Candida auris. So if you're, not washing your hands with soap and water and you're pumping that hand sanitizer, how in the world are you prepping yourself for the patients? And on that note, when you talk about cleaning surfaces, which I agree with you, cleaning is critical because I've seen people, say, oh, we don't have time to do two-step process. So we're just going to use bleach or we're just going to use this particular wipe where in one step we're going to go ahead and clean and disinfect. That doesn't work. And number two, and number three, it doesn't work, right? And Ronnie and what and Darrel, what to me is mind-boggling is that people are using just like the hand sanitizer on your hands all day to disinfect, which it doesn't do. They're using the wrong disinfectant on the surface to try to disinfect. They're going to go after a C. diff and Candida when they're using a wipe that may not go after either one of those organisms. And then they wonder, well, why are rates up? Well, no one's washing their hands and they're using the wrong disinfectant on the surface. It's not enough just to buy it. Am I correct here? Or am I just
Yeah, and I think that
in a
that's
bad
why
mood?
we need to get rid of
Yeah,
the term clean when visibly soiled,
right.
because increasingly the data show that potentially unsafe levels of pathogens can remain on visibly clean surfaces. And it only takes fecal matter the size of a pinhead uh, that contains enough sufficient infective material to transmit C. diff. So who on the staff is looking for a pinhead size of poop? They're not. And so we need to get rid of that term. And I talked to a disinfectant manufacturer here in St. Louis, and she and I were talking about, because her disinfectant says, that it's been tested in the presence of 5% soil on a surface. And that's the EPA standard for label claims is in the presence of 5% soil. And they used to use horse serum to replicate blood back during the AIDS and HIV era when that was the pathogen of concern in hospitals and the communities. But anyway, 5%, I said, can you see 5%? She said, if you take a white paper towel and wet it with water and you wipe a surface and it's any other color other than white, then you've exceeded the 5%. So you're using that product off label. And she said she asked the EPA if she could take that off her label and say that it would only be, you should only apply the disinfectant to pre-cleaned surfaces, and EPA would not allow that claim. But
Hmm.
I think that visibly soiled is not the standard because, who's like I said, looking for that
Right.
head size. They're churning and burning through these rooms. They don't have the time. But to your point, Mike, I think that people think that we don't have time for a two-step, but you know, there's enough scientific studies. I think in the last HICPAC, cleaning and disinfection for hospitals, Dr. Ratala, of course, wrote, and Ronnie, you know who that guy is.
I'm very familiar with Dr. Rotella.
But he's kind of the guru of cleaning and disinfection. But he said that there are 14 to 15, and this was back in 2008, scientific studies that say that if disinfectants are applied to a pre-cleaned surface, that 1 minute contact time is all that's necessary for the disinfectant, regardless of what the label says. Now, that label claim for 2 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever it is, for whatever pathogen it is in a lab, and it is not real world conditions. But the point is that that if you apply it to a pre-cleaned surface that you need, these disinfectants will hit their target
Targets.
of 6 log reduction, 5 log reduction in a minute or less. And so if it's pre-clean, that you've gotten rid of the soil that fights the active ingredients in that disinfectant, and it soil will shield the bugs from the active ingredients in the disinfectant. So, we need to pay attention to removing the soil. And I think for too long we have depended on the disinfectants to kill the little buggers when we ought to be removing them.
That's a great point. Go ahead, Ronnie.
And that's, a basic concept of infection control 101 is that you cannot disinfect what is not clean. And I know
Right.
they tout a one-step method, but I mean, show it to me in real world. Let the science be in the real world
Yeah.
at the bedside. Show it to me there, not on a 5% soil load.
Another thing that we need to get rid of is this balding. Calling surfaces what is it, Ronnie?
Critical, semi-critical.
Yeah, non-critical.
Yep, non-critical.
They call surfaces non-critical. And what did we learn in COVID? And just, I think during COVID, we took our eye off of the other bugs that are in the hospital, and we saw this great rebound. We had been making great strides against MRSA in hospitals, and we had it down to a point where it was, very manageable. And then CETA or COVID came along, and you had nurses clean patient rooms because the housekeepers didn't have the personal protective equipment, gowns and gloves. And I had a friend that she was working in a little hospital near here, and she called me up and said her nursing director wants her to go to Walmart and buy ponchos for her cleaning staff, and something that could be wiped off. And this friend asked me, what do you think about that? And I said, I would tell her whenever I see the nurses wearing ponchos around here, then we'll get them for the housekeepers too. But we had this great shortage, supply chain problem of isolation gowns. So we had nurses cleaning rooms, if you want to call it that, and they're wearing all this, all this, you know, breathing protection, PAPRs and what have you, and so they're concerned about the patients, and so I think that we saw like a 30% increase in MRSA during that period, and that's because we have people that went to nursing school, but they aren't in the cleaning business, and so I think, Ron, you said that the two principles is soil removal and then disinfecting, and so I know that in SPD, where they clean the instruments coming out of the OR, for the next surgery, they soil removal is critical. We found out that with the endoscopes, that there was areas of the endoscopes that were not reached by the cleaning process. And so we have people dying from endoscopies. But so removal cleanliness is essential before disinfecting.
So Darrel, if we went through so many different things that's involved. If you were going to go to a hospital tomorrow and you were called in as a consultant and they had C. diff, candida, that all the organisms that hospitals are dealing with across the country. I was just reading an article now how there's a major increase in C. diff and Candida especially across the country. And you wanted to give advice to a hospital and say, okay, look, let's implement X, Y, Z, and we're going to make a big impact on your numbers. You know, there's a lot of things that they can do, but let's start off with the number one or two things that are going to lower the rates immediately. What would your advice be?
First one is to educate the frontline cleaning staff that their role is not cleaning toilets and mopping floors, is infection prevention. And we need to raise their eyes to almost getting the microbiologist view of things and look for those areas. And we go after the high touch surfaces, but Ronnie and I were talking in that patient room where that patient is in that bed for, say, 3 days. And, when the EVS person goes in there to clean that room, she does not clean the bed rails. She does not clean the overbed table, because that is in the patient's private space, and you're going to wet it and then tell them they can't touch it for 5 minutes or 3 minutes or whatever. And their eyeglasses are laying there, their denture cup is there on the overbed table, and are you going to lift that up and you're going to wipe it? No. And that bed rail is something that nurses raise and lower probably 10, 15 times a day. Turn the patient, do this, do that, so that patient bed and the 36 inches around it is the most contaminated area of that patient room, more contaminated than the bathroom, because the bathroom at least gets disinfected once a day, but that patient bed and 36 inches around it probably doesn't get clean until the terminal cleaning process. So we have to train the employees we have to educate them about the bugs that are out there, the ones that are the problem, and that we have a solution, and that is clean and then disinfect, clean, disinfect. And so we get them to understand that they're really in the life-saving business. It's not mopping floors, and that's why the C-suite thinks that anybody can mop floors and clean toilets. And so now you've hired the person that was working at the drive-through at Wendy's last week, and now they're going to clean the OR this week. And what has prepared them for that role in breaking that chain of infection? And Ronnie knows about the chain of infection. There's a couple places in that chain where cleaning and disinfection will break that chain, and that means that the next person won't get what that person got if they break that chain of infection from one patient to the next.
That's right. You speaking about someone working at Wendy's and then all of a sudden working in the OR. One of the things that whenever I'm training EVS personnel, and they're trained to work in the hospital, and they're working outside of the operating room. And when I train them, I tell them, if you are called to the OR to do a cleaning, I said, it's not the same as cleaning the hallway, the waiting room, or a patient room. I said, there's certain procedures and protocols in place for cleaning that OR, and you should not do that unless you have been trained to do it and do it properly. And the same thing is true with the patient room. I mean, you shouldn't clean the patient room unless you've been trained to do it properly.
And that's why I say that we need to start certifying people. We've got a problem in this country with, millions of people in this country that, some are trying to deport. And, then we got this great gap in qualified people to clean in hospitals and healthcare. And why don't we connect those two pieces together, and let's start certifying those people to a certain level of knowledge and skills to do the proper job of cleaning, and no one goes into a patient room until they're certified. They can clean the lobby, they can clean the public restrooms, whatever, but they're not going to get into patient care areas until they're certified. That means that they're well trained, they're equipped with the necessary tools to clean and sanitize and disinfect. They're given the right amount of time to do the necessary tasks. They're provided with the tools to enable scientific measurement. We have to be able to measure cleanliness and make sure that our processes and products and people are working as they should. So should be measuring cleanliness, and finally educated about the prevention and transmission of disease.
Darrel, I was just thinking about what you were saying about, giving them the time to clean the room and making sure they do a proper job. I was in a meeting this week with a bunch of administrators from infection control, nursing, and so on. And we were talking about proper disinfecting. And one of the things that came up, which I thought was pretty amazing, was we don't have time to do, or we don't have time to add this to our procedure in cleaning the room. And I was thinking, well, the whole point of cleaning the room in the first place is to eliminate infections. So, unless I'm getting this wrong, is the idea we're going to clean as much as we can, but not 100% because we don't have enough time? Or is this a matter of, we really want to get 100% and we're willing to dedicate the extra 5 or 4 minutes to get that room where it's supposed to be? To me, it seems it's the first. It seems like most nurses are almost like throwing their hands up in the air and saying, well, we're never going to get it 100%. And we get that room clean for the next patient because, we got a bill. We got to make the money to support this hospital. And administration wants us in and out of that room as quick as possible for the next patient. So we may miss an organism here and there. I mean, do you get that sense, or am I just totally off base here?
No, you know, I say that, if my wife was, a patient in the ER and, they drew blood, sent to the lab, and, so we know that to run the test that the doctor is looking for, certain stats and numbers, could you get those results in 10 minutes when it normally takes 45 minutes? And would you trust the 10-minute results
No,
over the
not at
45
all.
minutes? So then why do we do that with cleaning rooms? What I say is, it's a recipe, and recipe for cleaning. I one of our favorite restaurants my wife and I go to, I was talking to the owner, and they have fantastic food. And I said, so whenever you're hiring a cook for the kitchen, I said, how do you interview them? He said, well, we sit and talk for 5 minutes, and I take them back to the kitchen. I give them a recipe and ask them to make it for me. And I don't need freelancers here. And I want people that can follow a recipe and get the same results every time. And so why do we rush housekeeping to do the job that takes 35 minutes and you expect it done in 10 minutes? And can you trust the results of a 10-minute clean when it normally should take 35?
Yeah, Darrel, no one's telling a surgeon, hey, when you do that valve replacement on that heart, can you do it in 45 minutes instead of an
So we
hour?
get more of them done.
We want to get the next
Sure.
patient into that operating room, can you somehow figure out a way to remove that appendix a little quicker? You're a little slow here in the
Right.
OR.
We
But
need
when
to
it comes
make
to
more
cleaning
money here.
we need to make more money. Like, we got a line of appendixes that we got to replace. You're
Yeah,
taking
why
way
sew it
too
up?
long.
It'll heal from the inside out anyway.
Exactly. But yet a room I'm like, I don't get it. I mean, I sometimes, go into these meetings and I'm listening to the conversation. I'm saying, but we're trying to disinfect that room so that patient can survive. If you bring that patient in there and you save the 5 minutes and he gets an infection and the cost to hospital, what is it, 20 some odd $1,000 per stay, even more than that?
Yep.
Yeah.
So what money did the hospital just save by rushing the housekeeper out of that room so they can bring another patient in that can get sick? Wouldn't it make more sense to take a little longer? I mean, you go into an EVS office and you see discharge rooms on a big screen, and then they're timing how fast those rooms are turning over. To me, it doesn't make any sense. There's something wrong in our industry when administration can tell EVS staff, speed up the job. We're not turning those rooms over fast enough. There's a disconnect. And it's a disconnect also why nursing and infection control don't go back with EVS to administration and say, look, we understand we need to make money by bringing in more patients and rolling over those patients. But if we're hurting these patients by getting them, infected with drug-resistant organisms, it's going to cost the hospital more money in the long run. Don't we? Doesn't the hospital see that? I mean, am I right, Darrell?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that may come closer to changing the HAIs in hospitals is going to be attorneys and
Hmm.
attorney for the plaintiff. And, if their plaintiff, their loved one died of a MRSA infection, and maybe the husband was admitted to the ER with heart problems, and so they do the cath lab catheterization, and they find out it needs a triple bypass, and they take him to the OR, and then he's in the CVICU for a day and gets MRSA, and winds up spending 30 days in the ICU and then dies. And what gets put on the death certificate is complications from heart disease, not the MRSA that killed him. He should have gone home after 3 days. And so it's going to take attorneys to change the minds of hospitals, and that it's got to be patients over profits. And
Right.
so I think that's going to come closer to changing the mindset in the C-suite.
That would be a refreshing change. To
I
me,
hate to see people die.
yeah. And
No.
look, and I agree. That you need to make money as a hospital. You need to be able to pay the bills. So you need to create efficiencies, and you got to do things smarter. And you got to, not work harder, but smarter. And you got to turn over rooms. But if there's a technology that is going to guarantee 100% kill rate in that room, but it may take 3 minutes more to do the room, may
Yeah.
take 5 or 10 minutes more to do the room. That technology should be allowed to do its job, especially, if you tell that nurse who says, we don't have the time, well, what if it's your mother or if it's your father or what is it if it's your child that's going into that room? Would you want that extra 10 minutes to guarantee that there's no infection rate? To me, it's a no-brainer. And look, I sell to hospitals, I supply hospitals, I need to make money to survive myself. But at the end of the day, the patient comes first. We're all in this so that the patient we could have a positive outcome. And otherwise, I might as well sell, to grocery stores, universities. Why am I selling to hospitals?
Yeah.
Um, that's how I
And
look
I
at it.
and I know that there was a nurse that did surveys of patients, actually interviewed patients, and I think her study. They did over 10,000 patients, and you know what the number one fear of patients going into the hospital is? They're going to get something that's going to kill them. A bug
Huh,
that's going to kill them.
yep.
So we're not taking care of that patient's number one fear, and that is of getting an infection that they didn't come in with, because they know people that have gotten sepsis in hospitals and have died, or they recovered and they're debilitated for the rest of their life. And so sepsis is a killer in hospitals. And when it comes to sepsis in hospitals, probably 50% of those sepsis cases came from an HAI that they got in the hospital. And then the mortality rate of those that get sepsis, Ronnie, is probably around 40 to 50%, the mortality rate of sepsis.
Yep. Yeah, it's very high. A lot of people die from sepsis, unfortunately.
So their number one fear is getting that and dying. And so if we're not focused on the patient, then why are we in the business?
Yeah, right. And in fact, Darrell, what you're saying comes full circle about the patient being concerned about getting an infection, which I know from all my relatives and myself. If I've gone in for a colonoscopy, as much as I'm looking forward to the Michael Jackson drug, which is, by the way, I recommend highly, the the
Love the stuff.
yeah, I love the stuff, best sleep ever. But when you go in there, you're thinking in the back of your mind, hey, was that cleaned right? Or I'm always looking around the room, having been in the industry, and I'm saying, hey, wait a minute, is that person washing their hands? Is this person wearing gloves that, they change the gloves? I'm always, paranoid. That's the number one thing I'm thinking about. And that comes full circle when we started today, when we go into a lobby of a hospital and it's nice and shiny and the baseboards are nice and clean, but we walk into that bathroom and it looks like Vietnam hit it. You know, the first thing you say to yourself is, well, if the hospital doesn't care about that public restroom and how it looks, what in the world is going on in the operating room where no one else sees it except for the four doctors or nurses and the patient who's unconscious? What in the world's going on there? So it may not mean anything at all, but that's what's psychologically going on. And then that affects what hospitals are also looking for, which are the HCAHPS or the Press-Ganey scores, because that patient is usually, if they're going to fill out that form, they're going to fill it out negatively if they were scared or nervous, and God forbid if they got any kind of infection in that hospital, or if their relatives got any infection in that hospital. Mike, you got anything that's on your mind?
All
Because
I'm
you always got the
hearing, it
best.
sounds like a mess to me. It sounds like everybody's working in different in different directions. And it sounds like a simple thing in the sense of there's certain procedures that need to be done in order to accomplish what you guys want to accomplish. And as
Right.
far as controlling the infection, anything short of that, we don't have time. Well, too bad. You got to create the time somehow. I mean, right? I mean, there isn't any shortcut. If you take shortcuts, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
Right.
So there's certain things that have to be done. Now, obviously, training people to understand why they need to do it, but then you got to have somebody policing to make sure those things are getting done. And then it's one thing you talk about cleaning for removal, for soil removal. That's something you could see. And I remember when
Right.
Tom was in the hospital, I'm sitting there and the cleaning people come in. Well, they came in to clean what they could see. They're sweeping the papers over here and then they switch over to here, and they weren't cleaning the whole room. They
Yeah.
weren't cleaning touch surfaces if that's the first thing you want to deal with.
Right.
Right.
So if you don't have, and you need processes in place, procedures, right, for each, the right tools, like you're saying. I don't know who gets involved in deciding what they're going to buy. I mean, are those people involved with, you know what I mean? The people making the decisions, that the tools and the programs are being sold by people like yourselves, telling you that, well, you do this, it makes it easier to get this done. And so are
Well,
those,
it's funny, Mike. You're right. A lot of times you walk into hospitals and you ask them, why are you using XYZ? They'll say, because the hospital down the block is using XYZ, or the hospital that I came from when I was, in a different position, I may have been an assistant nurse, or may have been, uh, an assistant director of housekeeping. This is what they were using. And to me, that's kind of scary
Well, that's
because,
okay if the process was good in that hospital. I
right,
mean,
but that's what's scary is who says that process was good?
right. Well,
It
that's
must
where
be
you got to have.
validated.
Well,
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
also what I was going to say with the infection control part, what measuring tools are being used to show that we are in fact controlling bacteria or whatever? Is there any kind of system to check to be sure that they are disinfecting or whatever?
Well, a couple. One is, a full fluorescent marking. It's supposedly invisible, but you
Okay, like
go
a
into the
ultraviolet type setup.
yeah, you have to go into the room before it's clean, and then mark certain surfaces, and then after it's clean, go in with the black light, and then look for removal of those marks. And my problem with that is that knowing my housekeepers, someone's going to be buying black lights and selling them down the cafeteria to all the housekeeping staff, and they'll just go around, look for those marks and then remove them. And then the person coming in after him says, "Yep, it's clean because the marks were gone."
The marks are gone. Yeah. So
Tell them a case of that happened.
they're not using any kind of swab testing or bacteria monitoring or anything
Well,
like
you
Well,
have
that.
ATP, Mike.
ATP, which is another one, but that is risky also. And there's many things that can skew ATP scores. And
Right.
so there is it's called a back to scan, and it's actually a black light, but it's like a flashlight, but you can see biofilm. You can see what soil still remains on a surface after it's cleaned, but it gets down to the microbial level, and just a regular black light or ATP, is not going to get you we have to make the invisible visible.
Right.
And
So
so,
is that particular light really expensive? Is that the problem with that light or?
yeah, it's probably a couple of grand, but I think that it is a great training tool, but it's also a great sales tool where you go in and say, let's look at some rooms that were just terminally cleaned. And
Sure, you can determine whether or not they were at that moment,
right,
right?
and it's making the invisible visible. And
Alex, sounds like you should be selling those lights
Thanks,
with a
Mike. I appreciate it.
with a program, an inspection program or something. Yeah, I mean,
And I know somebody that is really getting into that, and I could turn you on to them as well. But I think that is what we need to be doing. And, it's not just about selling, but I think that is the validation that the product, the process, and the person are all working like they should.
yeah,
Well, yeah.
definitely. You have ability to have that. That is what's going to help then for sure.
Well, I'll tell you, Mike and Darrell, Ronnie knows about this, but there is some real exciting things coming down the pipeline, technologically wise. There are companies out there that have figured out ways to actually reveal at least right now, there's a company that has done this with C. diff, where you can spray a chemical on a surface and put on a glasses with a, special light, UV light, and you can actually see the spores of the C. diff visibly,
Wow. Okay.
uh, which is going to be a game changer. And there's companies doing this where it's not only going to be C. diff, but they're doing this with MRSA, they're doing this with Candida auris. That's coming down the pipeline, and I think, Darrell, I think that's going to be pretty exciting because, like, if you go into a room and the room is full of soil, a patient's not going to want to go in that room. Nursing is not going to want to allow a patient in that room, and EVS is going to be in big trouble if that room, which was supposed to be clean, looks like hell. But imagine if in the next 5 to 10 years, you walk into a room and you will see with your glasses on, uh, all these different organisms around the bed, you're not going to let a patient in there. And like you said, Darrell, with lawsuits, that is going to be the beginning of lawsuits because you'll have people coming in with glasses, taking pictures of the room with bacteria and viruses, and that's going to show up in a courtroom. Well, my mother was put into this room. They needed that room cleaned in 20 minutes, and they could not clean any further. And there's bacteria and viruses all around my mother now. So you can only imagine, where our industry is going. I think technology is on our side and on the side of the patient. And I think we're going to see in the next couple of months and very shortly, next year, 2 years, uh, these products coming into the marketplace that are going to identify the bacteria themselves.
Yeah.
Then they'll need to have somebody that can monitor it though. If they don't use those tools and
Oh, you're
monitor
right
them,
on the
keep
point,
people
Mike.
accountable,
Yep,
and reward
yep,
people also. They should
yeah,
be rewarded
100%.
if they're continually doing a great
Yep.
job.
Yep, you need that software, you need the technology to record this stuff, and that is coming too. You need to create a logbook, electronic logbook, a before and after, the steps taken to clean, all that is critical. Because you're right, if just, spraying a room and you see the bacteria and virus, okay, great, now what? There has to be a recording device that shows what was before you cleaned, the steps that we used to clean, and what you now have post cleaning to verify and confirm that you did a proper clean. There's no bacteria.
And I think it's important because, like as you guys are saying, look at people are dying.
Yeah, this is
Right.
a life and death situation.
So it's got to be, you got to do all this. If it's going to take all that, then so be it, really. And just try to
Yeah,
make it as simple as possible and trainable to people so they
yeah.
can monitor it.
But cleaning
No, this,
isn't always at the microbial level. And, I interviewed for a job at a children's hospital and, I was meeting with the infection prevention doc and she and I were chatting and she said, "So how do you know that a room is clean when you're done?" I said, I gave her the fluorescent marking and the ATP story. And she looked at me and said, "Darrell, wherever I can go into a terminally clean patient room and I can see cookie crumbs down in the bed
hmm,
rail and I can see the red jello still
ay,
smeared on the table, then I don't need a black light to show me, to tell me that that room has not been cleaned."
right. No, that's a great
That
point,
much
Darrell.
is true.
Yeah. No, it's scary. I mean, that's why, people have this thing where, I don't want to go to a hospital. I don't care what. And it's, this is really, you're right, Darrell. And what you mentioned earlier on about people being scared about going to hospitals of picking up something.
Yes, it's a
That
real
is, that
fear.
is, yeah, it's amazing because hospitals, you want patients to come to your hospital, maybe market and show the potential patients that are coming to your hospitals, you got nothing to worry about because we do XYZ, because
Right.
we make sure we have a history, we can verify, we have a record, instead of how many surgeries went well, how many post surgeries where there were no infections, that should be made public and marketing should
Absolutely.
be involved in that process.
Yeah.
But anyway, guys, we came to the hour mark, and we want to first of all thank Darrell for giving us the incredible information and education today on what you experience and what you deal with and how you approach healthcare. I think this was invaluable, and it really I think this conversation was very interesting. I don't care what the rest of the world thinks. I thought it was interesting.
Are you going to be working with this new technology, Alex, yourself? I
I
mean,
am. I'm ready. I
okay.
already putting some trials out in hospitals. Again, I don't want to plug. Again, this
No,
this
that's
is not.
okay. Just that
But yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
are
We
working
are.
with it.
Yeah,
Okay.
this to me is very exciting. Any technology that we can be involved with that's going to save lives and verify what's going on, I try to get involved in. But yeah, I mean, hopefully down the road, as this technology evolves and expands, I can bring these companies on so they can talk about this groundbreaking technology and what's happening in our industry with this stuff. I think in another 2 or 3 years from now, every hospital is going to be using some type of detection device of bacteria and viruses. I think this is the future. It's an idea of seeing your enemy versus shooting it blindly.
Yeah.
Right now we're basically shooting arrows in the dark and hoping that we're going to hit something. Now, I think down the road, we're going to be able to see the enemy for the first time in the history of this world,
Wow.
which would be very exciting or probably terrifying if you go to sleep at night with the glasses by accident.
I can even see this becoming part of the survey process when hospitals are surveyed, that the surveyors
Yes,
have technology in their pockets that they can
yes,
go in and actually survey the rooms.
I
And
agree.
yeah, so who knows where it's going?
Before we
Yep,
go, I'd like to tell you the backstory about why I wrote Infection Prevention for Dummies. My
sure.
daughter-in-law, this was back in 2007. My daughter-in-law was about 37 years old, fit, ran marathons, was training for, like a triathlon, and spending a lot of time in the gym and with a personal trainer. And she got an infection between her thumb and her first finger, and turned out that it was MRSA that she had gotten probably in the gym, and within 8 weeks she was dead.
Oh my God,
Oh,
so
wow.
sorry.
Left
So
a son
sorry.
with 3 kids, and the youngest was 16 months old, and he had to hire a live-in nanny to take care of the baby and get the kids off to school. He's a uh, nurse anesthetist, a CRNA. And
Hmm.
so he had to be at the hospital at 6:30 in the morning, and but turns out that it became a bloodstream infection and settled around the lining of her heart. And so MRSA is out there in the community, and Ronnie and I talked about this. All these different bugs aren't all in hospitals. They're out there in the world that we live in, and we shop with these people, we live with them, we go to school with them. And so it's not just in hospitals. And we need to do a better job of educating the public and do a better job of promoting the role that proper cleaning and disinfection plays in saving lives.
Yeah,
Amen, Darrell,
I worked
100%.
I worked at in the ice hockey world for
Oh,
15
yeah.
years, and we had a number of MRSA cases in the rink
Yeah.
with players. Yeah, getting MRSA. Yeah, it's pretty bad.
Yeah, no, this is bad stuff, and it's a bad enemy. I'm sure these bacteria have a very positive role in nature, but when it comes to us, survival as human beings, we really need to take it a little bit more seriously, and
And
how
we're
we
out
deal
of
with them.
antibiotics. I mean, we're at the end
Right,
of the road for antibiotics. So cleaning and disinfection is going to play a big role in saving mankind, I think.
it
And
will. It really
we
will.
need to start certifying people to do the job right.
It's an
100%.
important job.
Yeah, definitely.
I want to end with something interesting. My son yesterday graduated medical school,
Oh,
and I was
congratulations.
thank
Congratulations.
you.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you. And what was interesting was the oaths. They had part of this class was a research part of the class, scientists. And there's an oath that they make for scientists. And then there was an oath that the doctors take. And and then they made there's a blessing for Maimonides for doctors that they read. And I was thinking to myself, there should be an oath for both nurses and EVS staff when they're hired that the patient comes first. It should be something verbal. It's interesting that the doctors and research do it. Why don't they make that oath? Maybe there is some hospitals that do that, but there should be an oath as an EVS person coming in that this is what I plan to do to make sure that the patient is taken care of, that the patient is comes first before anything else in my
Mhm.
day. And I think that would be an important psychological change
Yeah,
when it comes to,
I
Yeah.
think when you teach them the why behind what they're doing,
Great.
then they get it. And then when you show them how to do it, they connect the why with the how to.
right. Right.
Or
It's
also
important.
it can affect them also,
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
To their
not just the
family.
patients. I mean,
Yeah.
they
them,
could be the patient.
the visitors that are coming in also, the visitors.
Yep. Yep.
Some visitors, like when I was visiting my brother, I was there for 5 days straight, sitting in the
Yep.
room with him, you know?
Yep. Well, to finally conclude, I want to thank Ronnie. I want to thank Mike. I want to thank Renan for joining us today. Looking forward to our next podcast. Darrell, it is a real pleasure having you on. I think this is really stimulating and interesting. And again, we're doing this podcast in memory of Tom Nacella, Michael's brother. He was my first education specialist that we hired in Medama Solutions. And unfortunately, he was taken away too early for all of us. And so I want to just reiterate that this is in his memory. And we're looking to hopefully have many more of these podcasts where we can really educate the community, the hospitals, the infection control staff, and hopefully save lives together with information. But thank you guys.
Yeah.
Appreciate all your.
Thanks, Darrell. Thanks,
Thank you,
guys.
Darrell.
Thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
Darrell. Thanks, Ronnie.
Take care,
Thank
guys.
Alex.
you.
All
Take
right.
care.
Be
Bye-bye.
safe.